In the latest of our pre-election broadcasts, we're looking at tax. Over several centuries, lower tax and duties have been the cornerstone of Manx economic success. But can we rely on that in the future? Alistair Ramsey joins me again to discuss. We have been looking at various things that will be taxing the minds of the new set of MHKs, and obviously one of the areas that they will have to address, which certainly the last two governments don't seem to have been as eager to resolve as perhaps some might think they should have, and that is the gap between government finances, between income and expenditure. And one way to fill that gap is to increase taxation.
Yes, and it's a no-win situation, really. If you carry on overspending and dipping into reserves, people don't like it. If you cut services and spending, people don't like that. And certainly if you put taxes up, people don't like it. But at some point it has to be addressed. And I think what's bringing it to a head, and this has been obvious in the last administration, is the rising cost of health. And it looks like that can't be accommodated within the existing system. So they are going to have to look at it, at least.
And of course, one of the favoured ways of putting up tax is to put up tax in ways that are not obvious, and what is often referred to as stealth taxes. Yeah. Actually, the income that you get from those is fairly limited, but people do generally discover the stealth taxes reasonably quickly. I remember having to introduce a whole load of them as infrastructure minister the first time round, back in 2010, I think it was, when we were really hit with the 200 million loss in the revenue sharing arrangement with the UK. And I remember at the time, I think I even probably said this in Tynwald, I'm not sure that these are a sensible way forward for the island, because people are going to quickly find that this is an impact on their back pockets, and that will potentially reduce the overall economic output. But those sorts of taxation exist, but primarily the big hitting areas are VAT, income tax, and national insurance, and also local taxation, which goes to effectively the rates, which goes to cover the cost of delivering local services by the Douglas City Council and the commissioners around the island.
Yeah, and one of the areas where it doesn't produce that much tax is obviously companies. And it's 20 years ago this year that we moved to the 0-10 regime in response to pressure from the European Union. And basically that was a kind of ruse to get around what the European Union wanted. They didn't like offshore non-resident companies being given a preferential exempt regime. And I think what they expected was that all those offshore companies will be brought up to the level of local companies. I think at the time they were paying 15%. But we thought, no, we'll bring the island resident companies down to zero as well. So you got that 0-10, zero for most companies, 10% for banks at the time. But that was 20 years ago. I think it was a kind of temporary thing, was my impression.
It was certainly, the reasons behind it, I think I was in Council of Ministers when this was introduced. Effectively, the problem we have with the Isle of Man is our remote location from most marketplaces. It's also a great advantage. Any Manx person will tell you how delighted they are to be remote from marketplaces and busyness and all the associated skitter that goes with that.
Yes.
But the problem for business, of course, is you automatically are beginning your competition with one hand tied behind your back, because there's a cost of bringing stuff to the island that you might need to make the things that you then want to sell, and primarily the place you want to sell the thing is some distance away, so you then have to send the goods or services to the main marketplace. So as a result of that, we have to look for a competitive advantage, and what we have successfully done for several centuries. If we go back to even the 18th century, when we had a thriving economy, it was down to the fact that you could land goods in the Isle of Man at a substantially lower rate than if you landed them 80 miles southeast in Liverpool. Obviously, the goods then found their way to the marketplace via rowing boats and fishing smacks, I suppose.
Yes, and then periodically throughout history, the UK and the wider world notice what we're up to and clamp down, including actually taking us over at one point in response to the smuggling.
So recognising that tax is one of the things that we have that we can actually use to our advantage is one thing. But as we're finding at the moment, when the economy isn't thriving, and we have finally bit the bullet in relation to health and said, actually, we need to spend a lot more to get the service that we all want. What we haven't done is say, well, we're going to have to pay for this somehow, and by paying for it, you're going to have to increase tax.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, Dr. Allinson, the previous Treasury Minister, did say that, and he actually said, I think, in his last manifesto, that he was prepared to increase tax to provide a decent health service. So he gets full marks for integrity. I think his approach was a bit narrow and naive. So when he went for that proposed health levy a couple of years ago, there was no kind of broader context. There wasn't a range of options. There was no very wide debate about how we approach this. It was just the levy's the best approach, how would you like to implement it? And people took exception to that. But we'll have to go back to that debate sooner rather than later.
And of course, if the developments in the UK are going to actually get somewhere, this is particularly in relation to care of the elderly when they need residential care, actually trying to fund a fairer mechanism that is going to be it's going to come with a cost, and likely as not there's going to be a tax associated with that, and probably because we're quite good at piggybacking on good ideas that happen in the UK, probably the Isle of Man government will follow suit.
Yeah, I mean, that will put a lot of pressure on the government here to come up with a local solution, because people enjoy being separate from the UK, but they don't enjoy being seen to be disadvantaged compared to the UK. And they expect at least as good provision as the UK's got. So, yes, that will possibly bring it to a head.
So let's look then at the high level things, because again I recall discussions in Council of Ministers in which most of the areas of taxation are quite difficult to change and have variable results. So VAT, we've got very little choice in what we charge there. There are opt-outs that you can employ, but the opt-outs will mean substantially less income. So VAT, we have opt-outs, but we don't set the overall rate. That's set for us by the UK because it's a revenue sharing arrangement that's set up there, and it works reasonably well, although nowhere near as well as it used to work in the 1990s and 2000s. Then we have national insurance, which ostensibly goes to pay pensions, quite frankly.
State pensions and benefits.
I mean, that is the primary function of it. I mean, occasionally, and certainly latterly, the government has used it to pay for some healthcare services as well, but primarily it's there to pay for pensions, and probably it isn't quite sufficient. There have been various reviews about what we should and shouldn't be doing with our National Insurance Fund, suggestions that actually we probably need to either increase the contributions or decrease the benefits.
Oh yes, well I mean principally the thing that's draining the NI fund is the pension triple lock on the state pension, and again they tried to address that. Dr. Anson being very brave again, and ran into a brick wall, and it's recognised everywhere that that's not sustainable. But as pensioners are the people who vote, it's very difficult to take stuff off them.
And also, I think if you look across Europe, the state pension in the UK and by analogy the Isle of Man is not the highest.
No,
I mean,
no.
there are many countries that have higher pensions for when you reach state pension age. So it's not like we're overly generous in terms of pensions.
No, indeed. Maybe there is an argument that we're just catching up, but it's conspicuous around budget time that the increase in state pensions is normally a lot bigger than it is for other benefits, and we're aware that those state pensions are going to some millionaires as well as poorer people.
And there is a huge amount of government expenditure just to pay the state pension and the associated benefits, pension supplement and the like, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean the amount of income that comes from national insurance is around 350 million, and that's the second largest single source after VAT, which is just over 400 million.
And so that's national insurance, which can change, but of course the UK Chancellor famously has shown by increasing national insurance contributions that you run the risk of the charge being levied against you, particularly by business, that this is a tax on employment.
Yeah.
I suppose income tax is also kind of a tax on employment because most people's income tax is paid on what they earn through employment. But national insurance is very definitely that. And some argue that one of the reasons the UK economy didn't grow so well was because national insurance was increased, and that inhibited the potential growth.
Yes, whether that was true or not, I mean, you can make all sorts of arguments about economics. I mean, the third largest source of income is from ITIP, which is income tax taken from people's earnings, and that's about 233 million. So one of the features of our system is that most of our tax income comes from kind of personal sources, from people, rather than from organisations at income tax level. So that brings us back to the company tax, and the company tax doesn't really amount to that much.
Yes, it's tens of millions, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean there have been some changes so that over the years they started off 0-10. The 10% was paid by banks. Then they moved to taxing the larger retailers, which was supposed to be a measure to protect the one of the main local players at the time, but they also got hit by it. And now you've got this new tax that's come as a result of an OECD initiative, which is 15% on very large multinationals, and that's expected to bring in about 30 million this year,
which is worth having, certainly.
Yes, yes.
If you're in the position that Isle of Man government is in, so we've got those. We can't change VAT really. We can change national insurance, but there is the risk that by doing so, you potentially, depending on which side of the argument you sit, you potentially inhibit the economic output of the country. similar with income tax, although income tax has an even more important role in as much as the overall competitiveness of the Isle of Man as a place to do business is often judged by the rate of income tax, even for individuals, let alone the fact that there isn't any company tax. Individuals will be looking at that and saying, well, actually, I'm not so sure about the Isle of Man. They've just put up their income tax rate. They might put it up again, and therefore I'm loath to do that. I mean, so there was always a reluctance to play around too much with
that was the perception, and I don't know whether we were being oversensitive about that, but it's not something you want to take risks with. But of course we have the tax cap, which currently means that however much income you get, and some people, high net worths, have very, very large incomes, you'll pay no more income tax than 220,000 per person. Now that's a very reasonable amount of tax to be paying. So for the really wealthy people, the tax cap is one of the avenues that works for them.
And again, the thinking behind it, now whether there's any evidence to back up the thinking, but the thinking behind having tax-capped wealthy individuals is that the chances are if they move to the Isle of Man, they're going to bring their businesses to the Isle of Man. They're going to create business on the Isle of Man to a far greater extent. And as a result of that additional business, there will be more taxes paid, either through income tax, VAT, and generally the economic output of the Isle of Man will increase. So the lost tax income in terms of the tax cap actually pays for itself by way of the additional business and income.
And if those people are moving in, just to start off with, that's 200 grand tax income that you weren't getting before. There are a number of quite good examples of very wealthy high net worths moving into the island. They're quite older in some cases. They've sold their businesses in the UK. These people don't just put their feet up. They like to invest. They like to keep busy. And so that's been a very good source of investment for the island. The argument against the tax cap is that if you break it down as a percentage rate that these people are paying, it's a lot lower than the ordinary man in the street. But it's not a simple equation.
And indeed, most of what you have to deal with when it comes to running an economy is not simple. I mean, we do get people who try to compare running a nation's economy as the same as running a business. And whereas there are similarities in as much as if you're running a business, you take far more care, if it's your business, of where the money is being spent and how much you can charge your customers. Perhaps a little bit more of that thrift wouldn't go amiss in some areas. That there are an awful lot more levers of power to pull when you run an economy, and you don't always know what is going to happen when you pull one of those levers.
No, and I think running a business is, I know it's not simple, but relatively simple compared with running a government, because with a company, you've got one aim, which is to maximise your profits, satisfy your shareholders. In government, you are trying to please all sorts of different audiences, and it's not just about the bottom line.
And the other thing, which I know Tony Brown famously used to regularly say, and maybe he still does, the difference between a business and a government is businesses can go bust, governments can't. Governments will persevere because they can either borrow money, they can increase your taxes, and unlike increasing the price of a product in a shop, the customer can decide not to go into the shop and not to buy the product. You can't decide not to pay your taxes and expect to get away with it for very long.
No, some people would say it would probably be a good thing if governments could go bust, and they'd be a bit more careful and be less inclined to take money from other sources. But I mean that's democracy for you. I suppose the judgment mechanism in a democracy is you can get rid of the government, although actually in the Isle of Man that's not very easy either.
Not at all, and I think we've spoken on that at length.
Yes.
The big stealth taxes, for want of a better word, are things like vehicle duty. I mean, vehicle duty, I'm not sure where it's up to now, but it was bringing in, when I was minister, around about 12, 15 million, something in that order. And people would then point to the pink book and say, yes, but you're not spending all of that on the roads. And certainly that would have been the case in relation to the, if you looked in a fairly defined way at revenue spending, but of course a lot of government expenditure on infrastructure is done through capital schemes. So, for example, the promenade scheme, like it or loathe it, that was a capital project and therefore wouldn't appear in the revenue budget. So the road tax probably doesn't come close to covering the cost of fixing the roads. The other taxes, I suppose, or stealth taxes you could talk about, are fees and parking charges, things like this. But they in the overall scheme of things, they don't amount to much. And this government has famously introduced a order that unless fees are going up by more than inflation, they don't need to come back to Tynwald, which might then encourage Tynwald members to be less bothered about an inflationary increase than perhaps they would have been in the past.
Yeah. It's a funny thing that I think people are more sensitive to these smaller adjustments than they are to some of the bigger things. For example, when we moved to the 0-10 regime 20 years ago, that was a massive change because you were basically letting local businesses off income tax. They were then paying 15%. And subsequently, allegedly, there has been quite a lot of local tax avoidance through zero-rate companies. But none of that has prompted any major public or political debate. But if people think you're trying to pull a fast one on them, you're really damaging yourself.
Yeah. The one area of taxation that we've not really touched on is an area which is desperately in need of reform. I would argue, having been infrastructure minister responsible for local government, and that, of course, is rates. And unlike the UK, we don't require local authorities to run a lot of services. There are some services that are provided by local authorities which they must provide. There are other services that they can provide, and Douglas provides an awful lot of the services for the people of the Isle of Man by making Douglas City the place that we know it to be, and of course that then causes a fair amount of consternation amongst Douglas ratepayers who say, well, our rates are going to make this place what it is, and then you're all coming in here from the sticks and enjoying the benefit.
Yeah, that used to be quite a big thing. I'm not sure if it is so big now. There used to be a Douglas Ratepayers Association who were, vigilant about overspending and so on. But the whole rates issue is, to me, like a tribute to the political impotence of our system, really. I mean, the basis for assessment for rates, which applies to local authority services, water and sewage, is still based on estimated rental values of property in the 1960s.
And we had intended to spend much of the programme talking about this, but we're starting to get towards the end. We've only got about 90 seconds left before the programme runs out. So we will come back to this and probably talk about local government as well. But yes, the The one area of taxation that is relatively low compared with surrounding countries is local taxation or rates, relatively low in comparison. And you would think that that's the area that government could look to significantly increasing without there being a huge uproar if you were to do that comparison with the local taxation in England or Ireland or Scotland or wherever.
But if government tried to impose that on the local authorities, they would be very resentful of their independence being interfered with.
And we will definitely get to this. But yes, the as you've rightly identified, something that should be a fairly straightforward argument, certainly an area of taxation that is relatively easy to change without having a dramatic impact on the economic output of the island, is something that so far successive governments have been particularly shy of trying to tackle.
Yes.
Well, we will return to rates and local government in another programme. That was Alistair Ramsey. So what do you think? Would you be willing to pay a bit more tax if you felt that the money would be spent wisely? Should all companies pay tax, or would that risk stalling economic growth? Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gaughan at manxradio.com, and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget, this programme is available as a podcast. I'm Phil Gaughan. Go to Thanks for listening.